Sorry. I don't know if I can be heard okay on Teams, probably.
Does the sound okay?
Yeah. Working. Okay, cool. Yes, I think that's for YouTube. Oh. Okay. We're good. All right. So this is Assim Kalouaz. He's a psychologist from Trinity College Dublin, but he's staying in Paris right now. He works on evidence-based. He works on understanding the role of emotions or in digital art, and in particular, he's been preparing an evidence-based installation. In this installation, I'm helping him out with the lighting part of the equation, so that we have a collaboration going on, which he's going to be talking about. But for now, I think this talk's going to be more about the theoretical nature of what he's working on. And he's also part of the touch designer community, for those that know what touch designer is. So he's a great person to kind of get into contact with about that community and what's going on in Paris or around that. So take it away, Assim. Thank you. I'll just switch this. Okay. If that's okay, I'll just stand up. I'm used to standing when I present. Okay. I should still be. So thanks for the introduction. I'm actually based at UCD, not Trinity.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. It's okay, it doesn't make much of a difference. My research is about R. And so what I wanted to do today was mostly try to provide a different perspective on something that might resonate with you based on your work and what you're working on different levels, but focusing on, so like if you're aiming at having work that's transformative and impactful, I'm trying to do the same, but from a psychology perspective. So that's the input I want to have. There's going to be a lot of theory and models, but nothing that's too dense or complex. It should still all be accessible, but there's just a lot to cover to get to my main points. So I'll be talking about these theories and models. Then I'll talk about self-transcendent experiences and attention, which is at the core of art, basically. A little bit about my research experiments and what I'm trying to cover and investigate. The creative practice that was done aside of the PhD, but I'm trying to make the two converge. And then how it's coming together into this interactive installation, where I try to purposely design art based on the psychology research. So I start first with some definitions. So awe actually comes from Old Norse, and it has an initially negative definition, which is, it's close to fear or dread. So it's not like we easily link awe to awesome, but it was more about being filled with awe, but in a more negative way. So there's something about being reverential and inspiring. So there's a bit of a menace that's kind of crushing you, and it's above you. It's a lot, but then it evolved into full of awe, so awful, and then inspiring awe, awesome. There's a lot of discussion in philosophy about awe. I have not read these books in sociology as well, but the main theme and core definition is still maintained and reflected in these different fields throughout the centuries. So with Burke, it's more the sublime, but it's very close to awe. The two main properties are power to control and destroy. So it retains this kind of negative, powerful quality, and obscurity. So it's more about, if you think about horror, I guess, horror movies, horror games, it's more about the unknown that's beyond, and it's it's obscure in a sense that you don't know what's beyond that, and you don't really understand. It's more about understanding and having a sense of what's going to come to you. From sociology, O is mostly about the social entities, so it binds the people to the greater entities and make them part of something that's bigger than them. And it's kind of the glue that keeps these social entities stay together, because they are driven by these forces that are beyond their control. And from Max Weber, it's also about social order and interpersonal power dynamics. So it gets close to charisma, but in a sense that it's the charisma that will inspire awe. And that goes from Joan of Arc, Bonaparte, Mandela, and Adolf Hitler as well. So you can see that it's kind of neutral in terms of balance, in a way that you can be inspired positively by a very uplifting speech, but you can also feel a lot of dread and fear when you see how convincing and persuasive somebody can be, while being also very charismatic. And it's more about stirring the mothers from the insides and reprogramming the masses. So that's about the old definitions of awe. And yeah, sorry, there's a modern cross-cultural conceptualization that's more from the Eastern cultures. I think it's close to Buddhism. And that's more about the heartwarming feelings that we get when something is really moving, really touching. And it's also, it prompts this will to get close to people, to hug them, to rest your head on their shoulders and so on. And you also have these bodily responses, so the chills, lump in the throat, and the warmth. It's more of a positive take on awe, but my global point, which I'll add to that, is that it's usually not positive or negative. It's always, I mean, it depends on the stimulus itself, but there's no, like, awe in itself could be both. That's my point. And when it's seen as a positive emotion, when you look at the broaden and build theory, so from this theory, positive emotions, they allow you to broaden your awareness of what you can do, your repertoire of possibilities, thoughts, and actions. So when you're in a new setting, it's about what you think you're able to do in this situation. And when you get something positive from an action, it kind of confirms that this behavior is okay to have and accurate, and so you can do it again. And if you are faced in the same situation, you might be more explorative. Let's say, I don't know, if you've never traveled on your own to a country, then it's a bit scary, but then you do it, and then you meet new people, and it's fun and so on. So you do it again, and then you explore the museums, I don't know, you go on a day trip to a different place. And so it's about the resources that you acquire from the actions that you take following a positive emotion that you get. And so it works the same with awe. Awe broadens your prosociality and other oriented values. So I'll talk more about that. So prosocial tendencies, it makes us tend to others more. We care more about others, we become more empathetic, and that's because we feel more connected to others. I'll give you more examples of situations that prompt awe, and it will make more sense. There are also epistemic benefits, in a sense that because it's a meaning-making emotional experience, it makes you more critical about the incoming information, and you're less susceptible to tautological thinking, and you become more critical about this information. So in the recent research, there's like a seminal paper from 2003 that led to a huge wave of research on this topic. And they initially define awe as being in the presence of something vast and mysterious that transcends your current understanding of the world. So what this means is that in this definition, there are two main components. The first one is the need for accommodation, and the second one is the perceived vastness. So the perceived vastness can be physical or conceptual. Physical vastness will be when you face something that's huge. It can be a tree, it can be the Eiffel Tower, it can be the Grand Canyon, it can be the ocean horizon line. And the conceptual vastness is usually concept that are very hard to grasp. So time, space, the divine, death, yeah, these ones. And so the idea is that you feel small in the face of something big, because when you face this situation, it goes way beyond your expectation. So you factually or intellectually know what will happen, or like, I know what the Eiffel Tower is, but standing just under it, like factually, I fail to know the immensity of the experience that will come to me. And so when the experience largely exceeds your mental schema, your frames of reference of what you're going to experience, you have to accommodate this new experience into your mental frames, so it changes your perspective and understanding of something. And so it makes you feel small because your understanding is failed to accommodate your experience of the world. And when it's in situations that make you feel specifically tiny, you realize that you're part of something that's much bigger than you, and that's why you feel more connected to everything else. So there have been, it was a qualitative study, and they identified 7 themes that are good at prompting awe. The first one is nature, epiphany. So when different ideas come together into something that's cohesive, it's kind of the aha moment. Collective effervescence, that's a shared high level of energy. I have supporters in football here. It could be a concert, it could be a marathon, it could be, yeah, a shared moment of excitement for the same reason. Visual beauty, visual design, music, moral beauty. Moral beauty is more about virtue of character. So when you act or witness acts of kindness, vulnerability, courage, that's this category. Birth and death, spirituality and religion, and of course, in everyday life, they can come together in different settings. So this could be a mix of moral beauty, music, collective investments. One that I think is one effect that I would consider paradigmatic when it comes to awe is called the overview effect. You might know about it, but that's something that astronauts experience when they go to space. And they just realize, well, how small the Earth is, and you see the deforestation, you see the pollution, you see all of that. And at the same time, everything is void and empty and quiet and silent around it. So I have a few quotes from astronauts. So from space, I saw Earth as a precious, fragile ball of light hanging in the void of space, and I became more convinced that we must protect and preserve it. So yeah, that also captures what I was saying earlier. It's actually, I knew what to expect. I have probably looked at as many pictures from space as anybody, so I knew exactly what I was going to see, but there is no way you can be prepared for the emotional impact. It brought tears to my eyes. You can read this as well, but it's the same argument basically. And that leads a lot of people to, a lot of astronauts to become activists, mostly for the environment, because you see like the reality of the experience bridges, the experience bridges the factual experience, the factual information with the experience of the person. So what I mean is that we know that there's deforestation, we know that there's pollution and so on, but when you see it with your own eyes, it hits you. That's the point. And so that's why a lot of astronauts in the end become anxious for the environment. I have another quote, which is more recent and still relevant, I think. That's mostly the triggers, let's say, of all the very broad ones. So from an evolutionary perspective, there's the question of what awe does, like what function does it serve? So there's the social first theory, and it says that, well, following what I was saying around sociology, it promotes social cohesion, and it's this mix of reverence and fear and respect that maintain and strengthen social hierarchies. And yeah, it gathers people around dominant figures, and it creates this shared social entity. So, like, I guess in the past, that was helpful to create communities and societies and have them grow and develop. And the other one is the nature first theory, viewing danger from safety. So in this one, there's a theory that's aligned with that, which is called the prospect and refuge. And it's more about finding places that are more likely to provide safety and advantage. So if you see a vast scenery, it's likely to prompt awe. And for the same reason that this vast scenery would be likely very high, and at this height you could see predators or enemies coming to you, so it's safe. And at the same time, if it's safe, you can build a shack or home and then grow as a community. But with everything, most stuff that's evolutionary, especially in psychology, there's no way to prove any of them. So these are just two ideas. So one big question is awe an emotion? Because if I want to look at that from an experimental perspective, and I need to know what I'm looking at. So there are a lot of models of emotions, and you might know some of them. And I feel like usually when you come across one that matches what you want, like how you want to explain something, you just stick with it. But there are lots, and I'm not going to cover all of them because I just don't know all of them. But a common one is the dimensional one with the valence and arousal, the arousal complex. So we tend to rate, we can easily rate emotions in terms of that. So like happiness would be a high valence and maybe not so much high arousal, but excitement would be higher. Anger would be low valence and high arousal. Appraisal theories are more about the appraisal of the situation and the stimuli and how it aligns with the relevance of what you want to do, if it's novel to you and if you're able to cope with that or not. The neuroscience-based ones are more about the neural correlates that have been identified and tied to specific emotions. And the social ones focus on emotions as culture-driven instances. But the two main ones that, let's say, I have come across most often are the basic emotion theory. So the first one is the basic emotion theory, and I'll talk about the second one in a bit. But you might probably know about this one. It categorizes basic emotions as primordial or elaborated. So the primordial, like hardwired, that's the ones. That's the model that was driven by Darwin and then Ekman. So from this one, each emotion has its own distinct physiological pattern, and it can be identified quite easily. And so in that sense, they're universal. So when you see somebody smiling, you know that they're happy. If you see them frowning, they can be frustrated or angry. And that's where the facial action coding system comes from. So it's mostly on facial expression. That comes from Lie to Me. It's a show that was based on Ekman's work. It's quite old now. But yeah, so if you have, you have these combinations of different, like each, let's say, not muscle, but like, yeah, each muscle activation on the face is coded. And when you have different combinations, they are matched with different emotions. But this suggests that emotions are shared universally. And this is mutually exclusive with this theory. This is a constructed emotion theory, and that's also a widely accepted one, but yeah, the two are kind of clashing. And so this one is saying that emotions are meaning-making instances in the sense that they arise from the perceptual stimuli, your knowledge about the stimuli. So let's say I'm seeing a snake, but I've never seen a snake, so how will I act? The past responses. So what was the best action to take in the past? And do I do the same thing or do I try something different? Your internal changes, you know, that you might be more irritable if you're hungry or something like that. And the emotional concepts. And I think this is very, very important. So emotion in this definition, emotions are very much tied to language, and because different languages don't have the same words for all the emotions. So let's say I don't think there's a word for awe in French, and I kind of have a hard time defining it every time. So I wouldn't be able in French to say I felt awe. And so I would probably label it differently, but then from the other person's perspective, they would take that for face value, and then they can't say, let's say, if they're testing something to be awesome, and I'm not saying I felt awe because I don't have the language, then they can't say it was awesome for me. Whereas for an English speaking person, that would work. So it's very, very much tied to language. And when you account for all of this, so the stimulus, the knowledge, the past experiences, the internal changes, and the language, it creates your emotion. And so there's a recent model, 2017, 2020, that's called the semantic space theory. And it uses a computational approach, and that's one that kind of reconciles the two main approaches, the two main models, in a way that it captures the systematic variations in emotional-related responses that are very driven by culture and individual experiences and so on. But at the same time, they used samples big enough to capture the common architecture that we have as humans. And so I'll show you what they did and what they used, which is here. So that was the voice, the vocal burst. So basically, they used a series of stimuli, and each stimulus was rated on different categories by a number of participants, and I think they had 2,500 something participants. And so the location of each stimulus on the map is based on how it's rated as an emotion. So like, let's say I'll go to this one, and it's rated as confusion, sadness, embarrassment. So there's a lot of them, and they did the same with different stimuli. So that's gifts. I'll go to something that's nice. So that's between adoration and joy. It's not loading. Yeah. Just to show you in ears, admiration, awe. And so yeah, the placement is based on the ratings of all these participants. And so it shows that at a very large scale, you can see that the responses cluster around specific emotions or responses. So I would say as humans, we kind of react the same way to the same thing, but it still creates gradients that are different enough. And these gradients reflect the more complex emotions, and at the same time, they reflect the difference in, well, culture and experiences and so on. They also did the same with the music. I'll just show you very quickly. Yes, Sonic Triumphant. And yes, sorry. And speech prosody. So I think they used two phrases, and they're just pronounced in very different ways to reflect the emotion. So if I go adoration, and if I go there, okay. So yeah, that's what it is. And so if I go back here, yeah, so they use categorical judgments for, so that was for the gifts. There were 30 rating per participant, and they had to choose between these. And then they used free response judgments, so just to allow the self-expression without the constraints of the different categories. And also they were categorized in terms of effective dimensions. So for each of them, they had to rate at, I assume, from 1 to 7. Yeah, so that's for the main models. But then, yeah, I'm talking about R, but there's also.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
This was also based in like in religion, cultural difference, or not too much, like the groups?
I think the largest samples that was done on the Amazon Mechanical Turk, and I think they used American and Chinese samples. I mean, the sample was using both because they try to account for the, like, I guess, very different cultures, like yeah, on the two sides of the globe. So yeah, about the measures of R. So it's mostly self-reports for the reasons I just said, because you should take at face value what people are saying. So in these examples, measures of the small self. So because the more R you will experience, the smaller you should feel, like the more connected you should feel inside something that's much bigger than you. So it's expected that people who feel more R would pick the smaller circles. And in this one, the grids are the indicator, and people should draw themselves smaller as well. In the same line, there's the 20 statement test that's being used. It's about, so that people have to fill out the sentence that starts with the I am up to 20 times. And they saw that when people feel more R, they write statements that connect them to broader entities. So instead of saying, I am a student, I would say, I am a human. So something that's much broader than me. The R experience scale is the one that's being used the most. It's measuring different dimensions. So it's measuring vastness, needs for accommodation, physiological changes, time flow as well. And there's one I'm forgetting, but they never use the word R, and so they try to map the different dimensions of R inside the scale without mentioning it explicitly. Yeah, and there are other ones as well, but let's say the R scale is the most used ones and the pictorial ones as well. There are also other indicators, but again, the other indicators are never explicit descriptors of the emotional experience, simply because, let's say, I go on a roller coaster, I wear a armband or a wristband that measures my heart rate. It can go very high, but just based on the heart rate, you can't say I'm scared or I'm happy. Like it needs to come from me expressing myself. So R is very much related to parasympathetic activation. That's the rest and digest response. So it calms you down, and yeah, it puts you in a more relaxed state. But that's very driven by the valence of the stimulus. So if it's something that's more uplifting, it's probably more parasympathetic activation. And maybe the other way around, probably less, because there's no need to calm the person down. Whereas if it's more threat-based, there's probably a higher activation. In terms of behaviors, yeah, there's the time flow perception, and this is more about attention, and I'll talk more about that. But the idea is that we cannot have this internal clock that's ticking, so we have a sense of how much time passes for a specific duration. But there's only so much attentional resources that we have, and so when our attention is captured by the stimulus that's so huge for us, there's less that can be allocated to this internal clock, and so we lose track of time. It's the same with movies, it's the same with video games. That's how it works. Increased prosociality and humility are also behavioral indices. So I think there are experiments where people are asked to, let's say, give an amount of money to charity, and people who feel more are more willing to give and willing to give more. And in the brain activity, there's a reduced, I haven't mentioned that yet, the default mode network activation. I'll talk about that in a bit. And also an increased external attention and salience in the frontal parietal regions. So you pay more attention to the perceptual stimuli and you think more about yourself. Basically, that's it. But yeah, this is all very specific, again, to the stimulus and the sample size, and they can never be the sole markers of R. They're only indicators. And so when you take them together, you can only say, it's very likely that this person experienced R, but you can't say that was R, because unless they tell you, you can't really say that. Okay, so that was a lot of theory, and now it's more about how R takes place in our everyday life. So I just mentioned attention, and this is very much focused on this. So that's the unitary continuum, and this is about self-transcendence experiences. So it's these mental states of decreased self-salience and increased feelings of connectedness. So on a normal state, you like normal functioning everyday life, you pick up on sensory information, but you also think about yourself because you need to function, and the two are separate. In mindfulness, it's very active and volitional. I'll show you this at the same time. It's a very active process. So you actively focus on the internal and external changes. You try to listen to the sounds around you, to the sounds inside of you. So you move your attention away from yourself, but that's very controlled, and that's what makes it difficult. With flow, you lose yourself in the activity. I'm showing chess, but it can be swimming, working out. I know when I wash the dishes, it works for me as well. Like I think about this and I get focused on that. So it's a high level of focus. You're less focused on yourself because you're focused on the activity. And so let's say you lose a bit more of yourself. This is R. So R captures your senses in the sense that you're how do I say it? Yeah, you're very captured by the experience that you have. The next one is peak experiences. There's not too much literature on that, but a peak experience is basically when everything comes together in your life. And I'm showing a woman who just had a baby, but another example I use is a gold medalist. So they've trained for 15, 20 years, and then they win the gold medal, and that's when everything peaks. That's the peak experience. And the last one is the mystical experiences, and so that's mostly taking psychedelic substances. And in this instance, because I do a little bit of psychopharmacology, so the psychedelics, the DMT, LSD, psilocybin, and so on, they are agonists to the serotonin, which means that we bind on the serotonin receptors. And because we have those across the cortex, when the neuron so the serotonin activation increases the likelihood of a neuron to fire. So when you take these psychedelics, you have basically the whole cortex that activates at the same time. And so normally areas that would not communicate and be active at the same time, they are. So it increases the functional connectivity. And you pick up on so much more sensory information. Because you pick up on all the sensory information, there's much less attentional resources that can be given to the self as an entity. So you don't think about your emails or your project or the dishes or the groceries. You're just absorbed by the color of the walls or like the bark of the tree or this kind of stuff. So yeah, just to go back to that. And so my general point and approach in my research is that when you move your attention away from yourself, it's beneficial, especially in these current societal models. And I'll talk about that in a bit. So you could practice mindfulness, and it takes a while, but it works. Well, you could have mystical experiences, which you could also reach through mindfulness, but it takes a while. And awe is kind of an in-between. So you could feel awe and think less about yourself and be more connected and empathetic and have more social values and so on. And so that's why my research is focusing on awe and trying to understand how it works and how it can be designed into more common everyday experiences. And so my next point is that I think in everyday life nowadays, that's how we are. We become so self-focused that we forget about the world around us. And that's a very generic statement, but at the same time, this is pushed by societal demands, and it's not something that we have much control over, but just that we need to think about so much stuff simply to function. So just, the emails, the shopping, the laundry, all of that. And there's only so many hours in a day. So in the end, you just don't look around, just keep thinking about yourself and the stuff that you need to do. These are the stats, but yeah, in most Western or Westernized societies, I'm thinking of South Korea or Japan, that function kind of the same way as the Western ones. There's a lot of mental health disorders. There's a lot of suicide, and this is because of all these repetitive routines and chores. The environments that lacks natural space. We need the parks to survive the city. This is a problem, and we don't face new information that is likely to confront our frames of reference, mental schema, and I guess make us grow cognitively. So as I was talking about before, what happens when you're faced with something new that largely exceeds your expectations. But if you're commuting through the same route every day, you're just at work and then you go home, that never happens. That will just not happen. So that's a problem. And this constant self-focus can lead to maladaptive reflections. So the cause of the mental health disorders is basically, so we kind of compare and judge ourselves on a daily basis, but also to function. So if you know that you're performing less than your colleagues, so you know that you need to work more, but if you're comparing yourself that way too often and feel like you're not doing enough or you're just not enough, then that becomes a problem. That becomes rumination, and that's at the root of depression. But that happens when there's a lot of self-referential focus, and that's why there's a need to move attention away from the self. So this is just a way to illustrate what I've been saying. So we have this executive control network that focuses on external information, sensory information. And there's the default mode network, which is the prospective and retrospective thinking. And the two are anti-correlated. So you can't think about yourself, you can't stare at your phone and think about the email you need to send and see the cyclist coming to you. It's one or the other. And then is the silence network that does the switch. So the cyclist will ring his thing, and then your brain will switch from, yeah, there's something that's coming, I need to pay attention to that. So yeah, and yeah, that's not how we work. I mean, ideally work and function. We need novelty. We like to explore and understand new things. We are playful as well. We have this affinity for nature. There's a lot of forest walk therapy things, and I think it's kind of a fancy way to say we just need to see trees and grass. Yeah, touch grass is kind of what we say. Then we value experiences more than physical goods as well. So yeah, it's more about providing a space for mental and cognitive growth, let's say. And so when we try to do that, we work out, we read, we paint, we help others, we do things with our hands. That was supposed to be gardening, but we also turn to the media, and that's the most accessible way to be presented in novelty. So it's often movies, but it can be exhibitions, or it can be virtual reality. So in that sense, the artists have these creative visions that they bring to life, and they use, in the context of digital media, they use the technology, and these are the technologies that create the canvas and tools that enable the artists to bring life to what they want to bring life to. But in this age of human-centric digital media, I think there's a value of implementing psychology more consistently in this research, just because there's a risk of creating something that's too much. And I think that's specifically valid for VR, but I don't know if you guys do much VR, I don't think so. And also psychology helps us understand why and how specific things and features work. And so we can crystallize this knowledge and it can be reused in the future more consistently and controllably. So in my case, that's all. And what I've been trying to do, so that was just something I made on PowerPoint, and there's nothing that backs this up. But I've been trying to investigate the different ways you can get, I don't know if that's going to work, the different ways you can get to R. And so I think it's initially the personal headspace. So there's a state, but also a trait. No, sorry, the traits are the personal vectors. The personal headspace is, well, the state in which you are at a given moment. And let's say if you had a long day, if you're frustrated, you don't feel like watching a movie, and we just not resonate with you in the same way. The personal factors are how likely you are as a person when it comes to awe to be open to new experiences and to feel awe. And these two will shape the attentional filters and expectations and predictions. So how much, like how likely you become to let in a lot of new information. Because if you're too, I guess, reluctant to novelty or not in the right headspace or focus on yourself, and yeah, you're less likely to notice things that will confront your mental schema. So that's comes down to attention, and then there's the bit about the experience itself. So it's about the qualities of the experience, which should be unexpected, self-relevant, and perceptually or conceptually vast. To in turn challenge these models, and hopefully the emotion will be constructed as oh. So I won't get too much in depth in this, but basically in my first study, I was testing the effect of priming on us. So how much prior information changes the emotional appraisal of a situation. So I used VR. I had two. I used Liminal VR. It's the name of the app, and I had two calming experiences and two awe-inducing experiences. And I was telling half of my sample that they were all inspiring or that they were all calming. And I wanted to see how this information changed the way they reacted to the experiences. And so I was measuring duration perception, physiological indices, and self-reports. And just to get to the main message, because I can skip that, I found that, well, obviously the interesting experiences prompted more awe, so that was good. But yeah, when viewing calming content and when participants were primed for awe, they underestimated the duration more than the ones who had the calm priming, and that suggests that there was more attention that was involved in the experience, more attention engagement. And what I think is really interesting is there was a difference in where is it? Sure. I think that's the one. So the main discrepancy was between the self-reports and the physiological responses. And so I found was that when primed for awe, I think, yeah, there was a higher physiological activity, but that didn't change that was not reflected in the self-reports. And what this suggests is that there are two systems that play in parallel. Your physiology and the way you make sense of the experience, they are two different systems. And so my priming affected the physiology, but not enough to affect the self-reported emotion. That's the main take from this study. So I was focusing on the personal headspace. That was the priming manipulation. And on the second one, I'm doing the same. I mean, I did the same thing, but I also manipulated the pacing. And the idea is that with the attentional loads, if there's too much information, there's not enough attentional resources to process the information properly and to be likely to feel more awe. So that was done online. I used video. I mean, it's a slideshow. It's this one. I think that's the normal one, the one in between. So I was also manipulating the information that was presented before, and I was manipulating the speed at which the images were changing. So I had it was a 2x3 design, so priming 3 conditions. I mean, 3 levels, and spacing 3 levels. So no priming, descriptive priming, and conceptual priming. So that was the information that was given at the very, very beginning of the study. And the video had different pacing. So it was a combination of all that. And I found that so this is just a qualitative thing, but I found that the conceptual priming, this one led to more awe, slightly. And I asked at the end of the study, I was asking each participant if they remembered seeing each image, and if so, how much awe it prompted. And I found that the more awe they felt, the less they remembered some images. And it goes in line with this set amount of attentional resources. So the more your attention is captured by the stimulus, the less you have to encode other information. It's just like there's only so much we have. So I found that this is cool and interesting to see. Yeah, if your attention is fully captured by awe, then you can't pay attention to what's around. Yeah, this was just nice comments from the qualitative question. I was just asking people how did this video make you feel? And there was a lot of so people noticed that it was AI and they didn't like it, but for the ones who liked it, yeah, there were very nice comments. And just to, yeah, I'll try to be very quick. Yeah, and the last bit is more about the creative practice. So I skipped this one, but there was an old project. It was an asymmetrical experience, so I won't skip it. I'll show it very briefly. It was using VR, and so there was a physical lantern that the person was holding, and he was about navigating through 3 different spaces based on fairy tales. There was the Red Riding Hood, and then Alice in Wonderland, and then Snow White. But there was another user who was sitting at a desk, and they had this interactive book, this one, and they were making narrative changes that would affect the scene that the other person would see. And this is more in line with my work. So this is called Ocean Pulse. And that's using Touch Designer and Arduino. And the idea was to create this evidence-driven experience that would create a bite-sized experience to kind of pause and focus on something else than everyday life. And this is more flow and mindfulness than awe, but that was the first step. So it's simply, well, the microphone, an Arduino microphone, and when people blow into it, it scatters these particles. So I was presenting that at a couple of places. This one, I used this kind of homemade belt that was also tracking the breath, but in a more natural way. And I used 11 labs in the previous one just for the speech generation. That was the AI bit. This one is more integrated into the project, and it's fully generative. And I was just changing the size of the circle, basically. But at the same time, I was prompting ChatGPT and 11 labs at regular intervals based on the heart rate. And based on this heart rate, it would give different like mindfulness guidance prompts. So technically, you could sit forever, and as you keep going, it keeps going as well. So the idea was to give this mindfulness meditation that's adaptive to your internal changes. And in that sense, like AI to me was the only way to do it. Otherwise, I would have needed a real person to see the changes and narrate in real time, but that's not feasible. And this is the last project I'm working on with Michael. Yes. What I'll talk about now, and I'll try to do it very quickly, is based on a paper that was accepted yesterday, so that's why I have that. And it's about early design principles for our interactive media. So the first one is to weave a story. So it's still about, I guess, priming and semantic structures. So when you provide contexts it gives more sense, like the experience itself makes more sense. Like when you go into a museum and you look at a piece of art by yourself, or if you do the same with a guide, and the guide gives you the historical context and what was happening around, and so what you see in the piece makes more sense. And I think that's the first step. There's the contextual environment and presentation that affects the appreciation and appraisal as well. It's just like how, like, it's the layout and the scenography and the place in which the installation exists. The second one is this exceeding expectations and predictions. To me, that's the fine balance that's very difficult to get, and it's very person-to-person sensitive. But it's this idea of having the experience largely exceeds what you were expecting, but at the same time, when you look at it retrospectively, it's fitting and meaningful. So I guess the overview effect with the Earth, you didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, you kind of had a sense of what was going to happen, but it was much, much bigger than that. And when you're faced with the experience, it makes sense. You knew about the pollution, the ozone layer, and so on, and just experience it. And yeah, it's fitting. And to me, it's the challenge is to have this mismatch, but that's retrospectively meaningful. And when you get that, you bring people to acknowledge that what they know and the frames of reference are not always enough, and so this perspective change is beneficial and useful. The scale as well, so physical and conceptual vastness. I mentioned that at the beginning, but I think pieces of work that invoke these concepts that are close to self-transcendence, death and life and the divine and love and space and time, they are more likely to do the work. And at the same time, if the installation is gigantic, it also helps. And when that works, you get this subtle perspective change that should be beneficial, and it's the idea of having a collect, like throughout your life, you experience this kind of stuff more and more, and so it kind of changes you as a person, hopefully for the best. Another one is agency. We often value when the system responds to us. So like if you go to a museum or an exhibition and there are things that are interactive, you try really quick to see what happens, but if nothing happens, you just move on and see something else. Whereas if you see that something happens, you value that the system responds to your engagement, to your inputs, and it's this action-reaction kind of feedback. And that's where designers have the power to create this unexpected feedback to the inputs of the users that largely exceeds what could be expected from the input. So like if I open this and I don't know, something that burns out of it, that would be largely expected. And that's the decision of the designer. Balancing control and surprise. Yeah, you can introduce unexpected elements, but yeah, it's always within the constraints of the technology. And it's also noteworthy that the illusion of agency just works as well, in the sense that if you play some games that have narrative choices, sometimes you realize it's the same end anyway. And it's just the illusion of being in control that makes a difference. To me, that's also very important, but it's maybe not so much about art, but it's this tangible material and playful interactions. So we get into a state of play, which is akin to flow, I think. When we engage with something and it's this state of forgetting about the rules of everyday life, and it's kind of a suspended belief. Is that what it's called? Yeah, suspension of disbelief. So you kind of go back to a more curious and explorative state when you see the system engaged. Like from the few things I've done, I saw that people want to test the limits very quickly and they try to play around, and it's just nice to see. But that works better, I think, when it's with the tangible and material inputs. This is the same thing, this sensory motor opportunity. That's basically the fancy way to say, yeah, immediate feedback and a reaction to your inputs. This I will skip. And the last one is kind of cohesion of all the previous ones. And so when you get something in which there is agency that goes beyond the expectations, that's also meaningful, the work speaks for itself in the sense that it just makes sense and you see what was the intention and just get it and you don't need to read the description, it just lands on you. So that's, I guess, like I'm conscious that this is all very person to person sensitive and different, but because as humans we have a similar architecture anyway, I think there's a this value and that's a rationale that's good enough to look at that and provide the foundation of what could be the basics of creating or inspiring work. This is the last one. That's the current project I'm working on with Michael. This is an installation that has four layers. I'm using two. Yeah, I'll show you the diagram just in a bit. But basically, I'm trying to prompt awe by translating these cognitive processes into design features. The approach is to have this kind of sequential reveal to get the sense of scale and vastness. I'm using the breath as a way to interact. There's also a binaural tone to facilitate this meditative states. You might know about binaural audio, and depending on the frequency, you get the people into different states with the brain entrainment, I think it's the term. And yeah, I'm also trying to present these different concepts. And yeah, I'm doing the, that's the demo. Yeah, so there are different parameters that are being changed with the breath, but basically that's not the exact layout, but it's very, very close. I have this depth camera that targets the chest, these two illusion boxes. So that's when you breathe in and the projection is blurry. And this is also fading out. And when you breathe out, it becomes more full. The lights brighten up and the projection is also clear. I'm going to run this study normally from this weekend till the end of August. So if you're interested in participating, that's my shameless plug. But that's going to be at the École Supérieure du Digital, from Saturday. But I should give more information about this. And I think I'm just on time. Yeah, barely. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Respect the care code.
Yeah. Thank you.
In the meantime, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So you talked about the attention thing, and you mentioned there was filters. And correct me if my notion is wrong. So you said filters. So I'm believing that it's a multi-step filter. And from what I believe, if there's some kind of experience, if I'm experienced it, it should be grab my attention immediately. If it's not grabbing my immediate attention immediately, I will just skip it.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about filters, did
Yeah.
your study think of it as static or a dynamic way? Because if it's like static and my attention was not grabbed, did you just put it as null and void? Or if it was like a music that I didn't like in beginning of 15 seconds and after that I like it. So did you consider that also as like a data set for you, or did you just sense it as if it was not grabbing my attention immediately, it was not a word?
So there are a few things. So in the experiment itself, I'm questioning about attention engagement, like that's in the questions I ask. Like it's I'm spoiling, but it's from like 1 to 7. I was very absorbed in what I was experiencing, or from, you could say 1. So that's one way to get attentional engagements. But when I'm talking about attentional filters, it's more about in your everyday life, you never process everything that comes to you. And so like if you pass by people who are speaking Thai or like Chinese, if you don't know Chinese, you don't pay attention to that, just not notice it. Whereas if you start learning it on Duolingo, then the next time it happens, you might pick up on the words, and it just becomes relevant information. And it's kind of pre-processing because before it comes to consciousness, like it's just the brain that filters in and out what's relevant to you. And I think the last piece is about how people will pay attention to the thing. I think like once you agree to participate, you sit down and I mean, you can not pay attention, but there's still, I mean, I assume the motivation was high enough that it got your attention, at least at the beginning, and then maybe you won't like it, and that's fine as well. Did that answer the question? Yeah, kind of.
Kind of, but it's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
You mentioned neural correlates for O.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate?
I don't have all of them in mind, but I know it's tied to incongruity detection. So that's mostly surprise, but it's the mismatch of like between what you perceive and what you were expecting to perceive. So I mean, yeah, if you think anything, like I was thinking about that on my way here, and like I was trying to grab the metro bar, but I was looking at my phone, and it was just like I couldn't grab it. And I think there was this mismatch between my expected action to perform the grabbing and what I was actually doing. And so, yeah, that was a mismatch, but that's also what you can expect from, I guess, any situation, and that's when it becomes surprising. So that's, yeah, there's this one. There's also, sorry, the lowering of the DMN activity, the default mode network. So technically, when you experience more of these networks are less active, and it's more it's the central execution network that's more active a little bit. And yeah, there are more. I can give you the papers that go more in depth, but I don't have all the brain areas in mind. But yeah, I can send you the paper. Yeah.
I have a question. You said during the presentation that the language could be a barrier because this word you don't have in French.
Yeah.
But your research is in French. How do you manage?
It's one of my requirements to be French speaking. I don't know if you speak French fluently, but that's my requirement.
Yeah. But how you manage it? Do you have in French a word closely related, or you are mostly collecting about feelings?
I say sublime. Yeah, that's the closest to me. And yeah, but I let people express themselves as well. There's one question that's how did this make you feel? And so based on that, I can see it. But because I don't measure, I mean, I measure the effects of all the small self, the vastness, the cognitive correlation, and so on. This should reflect awe without explicitly saying, did you feel awe? That's the approach.
And in case you write your work, you mention that you use sublime as a word in French.
Yeah, I'm going to advertise, and it's le sublime dans l'art numérique. So yeah.
No, I'm just asking because actually yesterday, without to know that you talk about this, I'm Brazilian. I was thinking Portuguese about the expression of feeling related to jealousy.
Okay.
And we have two words actually. And because we really separate what's positive from negative.
Okay.
And in French and English, you just have jealousy.
Yeah.
And this makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, so like there's more subtlety in Portuguese that you couldn't get in French recognition. Yeah, you would fail to capture the same thing. And that's a problem. But at the same time, that's why I think measuring these dimensions that are consequence of R is a better way than just testing if there's R or not. Yeah.
Yeah, so you talk a lot about being feeling small, and actually that's often a bad thing, like regarded as a bad emotion or a bad feeling. But I think it's about feeling small with respect to everything, and as though it's not connected to you and that you are against it or it's against you. That would be the negative feeling of feeling small.
Yeah.
Whereas in this case, it's feeling connected to a thing that's larger than you, and you feel small with respect to it.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting that one is associated with really negative mental health illnesses, and maybe it also, to me, I've been reflecting on this, might be the root of different personality disorders and sort of antisocial personality contexts, where you feel very disconnected to everything else, and then the other where you feel more connected to everything else is associated with better mental health. I mean, it's like, it's very interesting that they're
Connection.
very similar concepts,
Yeah.
but depends how you reflect on your connection
Yeah.
to everything else.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind in the first situation is the helplessness as well, and that connects with the agency, and so not being able to act on your situation, and yeah, no change that you can make on your own. I don't know if that how much that relates, but yeah, probably it does. Yeah.
It was really, really interesting. I hadn't thought about it this way before.
Thanks. Okay. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Oops. Sorry.